To Ephesians chapter number 6, verse number 4. And then chapter number 3 of Colossians and verse number 21. I'm just going to be honest, parents, this is not going to be fun. So, Ephesians chapter 6, verse number 4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Colossians chapter 3, verse number 21. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. And so I want to look tonight at the thought of provoke not your children. Provoke not your children. And so we've started a couple weeks ago and looking at the thought and the subject of parenting, and I have reminded you each time that I do not claim to be an expert on the subject, and I'm not saying that my kids have turned out exactly like they should or that they will. It is by the grace of God that we've been able to accomplish what we have, and it's not been us, it has been the Lord. And not every child is the same, and so everything doesn't work across the board for each child. I learned real quick that my three are completely different, and that it took different discipline for the three of them, and it took different rules and different standards, so to speak, for them to behave and accomplish what they needed to. But we also had a set standard. We had set rules, and we had set goals in the house that it may have took more discipline to get this one to follow than it did the other one, but they were still expected to follow them. And tonight, in dealing with this, he said to provoke not your children. And so I'm interested in that word provoke as we look at it tonight, and then we're going to look at the difference between the anger and the wrath before we get into the message. The word provoke has the idea of exciting, to excite, or to enrage. It is the idea of proving or pushing them toward something. And so it is not, it should not be our desire. It goes against what the Lord has told us when we are enticing them or pushing them to anger or to wrath. And so we want to make sure that we are avoiding that aspect of parenting. And then he says in Ephesians, it is provoke not to wrath. And in Colossians, it is provoke not to anger. And now these are similar, and they would be considered sister verses, so to speak, in the sense that one can absolutely lead to the other. But I believe that they're also separate issues. I believe that there's a reason that he uses wrath in one and anger in the other. And I do believe that we ought not provoke our children to anger or to wrath. And the word anger, I believe, has to deal with the earthly state of their behavior and not provoking them to a fleshly anger, a fleshly madness, that we would provoke them to the point to where we are no longer disciplining them. We are doing it just to watch them lose their temper, and we are provoking them in such a way that it is causing them to be angry. But then I believe that the word wrath, as you'll find it often does in your Bible, has to do with their eternal state. And so it's not that we would not only provoke them fleshly to anger, but that we would not provoke them to wrath, that we would not provoke them to ending up in hell. And so it is a weighty statement that God has made there in Ephesians, that there is, if he is telling us not to do it, there is the chance of us doing that. And so we can provoke our children in such a way that they would end up spending eternity in hell because of something that you and I did as a parent. And God forbid that any of my children would choose to reject Christ, would choose not to be a follower of Christ and not believe on the Lord Jesus Christ because of something they saw me do, because of some way they saw me live or behave. I'd hate to think that though I'm saved, I lived in such a way or did things in my home in such a way that it led to my children wanting nothing to do with the Lord and them ending up in hell. Provoke not to anger, provoke not to wrath. And so I want us to see just several ways tonight that I believe we can accomplish that. I would say, first of all, that we would do that with inconsistent activity. When we are inconsistent in our parenting, when we are inconsistent with our walk with the Lord, we are inconsistent in our life, then we are provoking our children to wrath. I would say that when we're inconsistent with our direction, it is important that you raise your children, that you properly instruct your children, and with that comes giving them a clear direction on what we're expecting out of them. This pollen got y'all as messed up as it does me. I mean, it is. I don't usually have trouble, and this year it is bad. We were sitting at a ball game with Jesse the other night, and the wind started blowing, and it looked like it was raining. I mean, there was so much pollen falling out of the trees, and it's just crazy. But anyway, whenever we don't give, sorry for the commercial, when we don't give clear direction on what we're expecting out of our children, we're hurting our kids. I mean, I think we have expectations for them. I have expectations for my kids. And we have expectations around the house and what we expect them to do and what we expect them to accomplish in and around the house. We have expectations of what we're expecting educationally and what we're expecting even church-wise and spiritually speaking. And so whenever we do not set a clear direction and tell them, look, this is what's going to take place and this is what's going to happen, and then we get upset and we try to discipline them for not following orders that we never clearly gave, we are hurting them rather than helping them. When we don't give clear consequences or follow through with those consequences, we're hurting our kids. Listen, night parents, if we tell our kids, look, don't do that, don't behave that way, don't talk like that, if you do, this is what's going to happen, and then they do it, and we say, well, don't do it again. We're hurting rather than helping. Whenever we tell them that, look, if you do that, I'm going to spank you, all right? And then they do it and we don't spank them, we're not helping them. If we tell them, all right, if you do this, you're going to get grounded, or you're going to lose this, or you're going to lose that, and it's going to be for this amount of time, whenever we don't hold up to the standard of discipline that we have told them, we've created an issue. We've become a hindrance in their life rather than a help. Now, here's our problem, I think, as parents a lot of time, and this was, I learned real quick, this wasn't a good thing to do, but I think maybe I'm the only one that done it, but I think sometimes we tend to exaggerate the consequences thinking it's going to deter the action. We think, you know what, if I tell them that if they do this and I give them a bad enough consequence, they'll make sure they don't do it. Well, the problem is they do it. And then I gave them such a severe consequence that I don't feel right about giving them the full consequence. All I've told them and all I've taught them is that they can do what they want to do because the consequences aren't going to be near as severe as what they've said they would be. I mean, we're living in a society that is now operating that same way. We have laws, and if you break certain laws and you do certain things, they say that you're going to spend a life in prison, and then they get out with 15 years served and end up on parole, or they're allowed to pull ankle monitor and time served, and we're raising our children the same way. We're telling them, if you disobey this way, if you do these things, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to punish you this way. And then when they do it, we don't react the way we said we would. We are hurting them rather than helping them. I've been guilty of it, parents, though. I'm just telling you, be careful whenever you tell them that if they do this, you're going to do this. Make sure that it's something you can follow through with. I learned real quick that it's a lot easier to tell them I'm going to ground them for 2 weeks than it is to actually do it. Because when you take everything away from them, they follow you around. Daddy, what we doing? What you doing, Daddy? Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. I mean, they ain't got nothing to do. And so for 2 weeks, all they're going to do is aggravate you. And if you're not careful, man, a week into that thing, you'll say, you know what? You can have this back, and you can have that back. And you've taught them that we're really not going to discipline like we said we would. We're teaching them that the authority in their life isn't going to punish them like they said they would. And so now, whenever it comes time to grow up in society, well, this is what the law says, and this is what the consequences are for it. Consequences ain't never matched what they said. Why would they start now? Well, we're going to stand before the Lord one day, and you're going to have to give an account. And ain't nobody else been consistent in my life with discipline. Why would he? I'm just saying that we are hurting our children more than helping them whenever we have inconsistent activity and whenever it comes to our direction, when it comes to our discipline. Be consistent and fair in your discipline. Do not discipline out of anger. Notice I didn't say don't discipline while you're angry. There's a difference. You can discipline while you're angry without doing it in anger. So I'm just telling you. I can discipline reasonably and be mad. I can discipline reasonably and be angry. But I can also take you back to times in my life that I have disciplined angrily because I was angered, because I was mad, because I was upset. I'm a firm believer that I think there's times that your kids need to see you upset. I know parents who say, well, I don't ever want my kids to see me lose my cool and lose my temper and don't tell my kids that. I think they need to see that they can do things that hurt mom and daddy so bad that it brings this on them. Why? Because the very same thing is said about the Lord. I mean, he walks into the temple and sees what they're doing and flips the tables over and runs them out of the house of God because they made it a den of thieves. And I mean, he just goes off on them. I think there's times that they need to realize and understand that what they have done isn't kosher, that it's not right, and it has caused an issue and it has upset us. But we have to be able to handle that situation. Though we're angry, we can't handle it in anger. If you handle it in anger, you're going to abuse your child. You're going to abuse them verbally. You're going to abuse them physically. We've got to learn how to discipline while we're angered without doing it angrily. And so be consistent in your discipline, but don't discipline them out of anger. Discipline out of anger will cause you to punish in a way that you'll regret later. You may spank them too hard or inflict a grounding that you later are trying to make lighter because you imposed it out of anger. I would say inconsistent activity, not only with our direction, not only with our discipline, but with our deity. When it comes to the way that we serve the Lord, the way that we worship God, the way that we are faithful to church, the way that we read our Bible, the way that we, pray, we need to be consistent in that activity. When we are inconsistent, we are provoking our children to wrath. Listen, how you worship, how you live for the Lord, it is affecting your children. And if you're inconsistent in your walk with the Lord, it can cause your children to grow up and not want to have a relationship with the Lord. Behaving one way at church or in public and another way at the house will provoke your children to wrath. Can't tell you how many homes look happy in public. How many homes look happy in church. And it's just the opposite when we get to the house. and we're raising our kids in it, and we're expecting them to turn out differently. We just dealt with it last week. I don't spend a lot of time on it, but I preached with the possibility of Alexander and Rufus, and one of them being what Daddy was in public, and one of them turning out like what Daddy was in private. And here's the reality of that. If we're not careful, we're going to portray in public that we love the Lord and we want to serve the Lord, and that we're gung-ho about being a Christian, and we're going to be faithful, and we're going to, and then we get home and we don't open our Bible. We don't pray. I mean, we get home, and most of us, sadly, won't even take our Bibles out of the car, and our kids, they watch that. They see that. And they watch us come in here and listen to preaching and talk about how important the things of God are to us. But they're only important at church time. They're only important on Sunday. They're only important on Wednesday night. And so whenever we are inconsistent in our deity, inconsistent in how we worship and serve the Lord, it is provoking our children. I think one of the saddest testimonies I've ever heard come from, and I wouldn't dare tell you who, but come from one of our teenagers who said, you don't realize what Mom and Daddy's really like. What you see at church isn't really them. I thought, what a sad state of affairs that they had raised and brought up a child in their home who in their teenage years had come to the conclusion that Mom and Daddy's Christianity, Mom and Daddy's, confession, testimony of salvation wasn't real because they didn't see any evidence of it at the house. I'm just talking about inconsistent activity. If you're not consistent in front of your children, you're provoking them. I'd say secondly, indolence activity. I-N-D-O-L-E-N-C-E, indolence activity. It's the avoidance of certain activities. There are certain activities that we tend to avoid that if we're not careful, will provoke our children. I'd say firstly, time. Time spent with your children and your family is one of the most important things in your life. I would say that it's only second to time spent with the Lord. And listen, I know we all have our excuses to why we can't spend more time than we do with a lot of them, and a lot of them is legitimate excuses. But I'm afraid even the time we do spend isn't quality time. Mama, Daddy, when we're at the house with them, are we really with them? I am so guilty in this day and time of being at the house and not being there. I'm just honest. And I'll get caught up in certain things and stupid things that don't matter. And man, next thing you know, I'm not studying and I'm not, reading and doing. I mean, that's legitimate things. But I'm watching, scrolling on Facebook or watching a TV show. And before you know it, the day's gone. And it's like, what in the world? And if we're not careful, we're going to miss out on time we should have spent. We're there with them, but we spend more time on our phones or computers. We spend more time doing things for work or playing games or checking social media than we do really spending time with them. It's not that we don't have time. It's that we don't use the time we have. Just being honest. I mean, we understand you're working 8, 10, some of you 12 hours a day. And so you're coming home and you don't have that much time in the evenings. It wouldn't take much time if you would just make it quality time. It wouldn't take a lot of time to make a difference in your child's life if you just make what little bit of time you do have and can spend quality time. Now, here's what we got to overcome. We're tired. We're aggravated. Things haven't went right at work all day. We've had to put up with nonsense and And, you know, I mean, whenever I was a supervisor, I felt like I was raising kids again on the job and dealing with temper tantrums and people not getting along and fussing and fighting about who ain't working and who ain't doing and who is doing and, you know, who's missed so many days. I mean, and it was just constant all the time. And the last thing I wanted to come home was to come home and have to referee again. You got to learn to separate the two. You hadn't been there all day, and even though you've had to put up with it at work all day, you hadn't been putting up with it at home all day. And you can't shut yourself out just because you had to deal with it all day at work and don't want to deal with it at home. If you're going to shut somebody out, take an emotion at work, and don't be the supervisor. Just go back to being a laborer, so that you can deal with it at the house if you can't handle both. Why? Because losing those people at work ain't going to be near as important to you as having lost your children because you couldn't handle the pressure. I'm just trying to help us tonight. I'm simply saying that whenever we have time, it needs to be quality time. I would say the avoidance of praise. If you're never giving your kids positive feedback, you're missing it. I'm not talking about praising them for everything they do. Listen, I am not a proponent of participation trophies. It drives me crazy. I mean, we have sporting events now, and it doesn't matter what place they come in. I mean, we have games and they don't even keep score. What's the point in playing? What's the point in having the game? I mean, if there's not going to be a winner and a loser, well, we're just trying to teach them sportsmanship. That's part of it. Anybody can be a good sport whenever everybody won. Be a good sport when you got beat by 50. Be a good sport when it wasn't fun and it was miserable and you had to play anyway. We had a softball game the other week, and man, it was brutal. I'm just being honest. I mean, it was brutal. And they had a pitcher that was great, and our girls, I mean, they were struggling to hit off of her. And when they did hit, they had a great defense. And man, right away they had players that could hit the ball. And I think one right out the gate in the first inning hits a home run, and you know, and our girls are just overwhelmed. And all of a sudden, you look at the scoreboard, and it's like 9-0. First 2 innings. That ain't fun. But you want to teach them good sportsmanship? Teach them how to keep playing, how to keep putting 110% effort in whenever they're already overwhelmed and defeated. What happened? They continued to play, continued to fight back. The other team, it was toward the 4th or 5th inning. We managed to not get run ruled, and they put a different pitcher in. Girls started hitting off of her. We scored several runs. You know what they did next inning? They put the other pitcher back in. They saw that wasn't working out, and so we lost. Nobody said, "Man, y'all did a great. Y'all won. No, they lost. It was bad. It was ugly. It was bad. But we learn from it, and we grow from it. And man, we're raising kids today and teaching them that, everybody's a winner, and everybody gets a trophy, and it doesn't matter what place you end up in, and it does. We're teaching them that it doesn't matter if you fail, it's still a success. It's not the case. I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody marrying my daughter who has a standard of failure for success. I want them to know the difference between the two and to be striving and working toward success. And if you're not praising your children when they do succeed, missing out. And I'm afraid a lot of times I've been quick in my life to point out what they do wrong and a lot slower to point out what they did right. Man, if they did something wrong, I'd call them out for it, and we'd discipline and we'd punish and we'd do. And then they go all week and do things right. And, they very seldom, but they did, maybe do their chores without having to be reminded. And, you walk in and the dishes are washed and you're scratching your head going, who come and wash the dishes? Surely it wasn't one of the kids. And, and the house is like it's supposed to be. And you didn't have to fuss about it and you didn't have to fight over it. And I was such a good daddy. I'd say something smart rather than just, man, I'm proud of y'all for doing what you're supposed to do. I'm just saying that just as quick as we are to discipline when they do wrong, we ought to be just as quick to praise them when they do right. But I'm afraid that there's an imbalance in most of our homes. And you see a home who has the discipline right, but the praise wrong. And then you see a home that has the praise on overdrive. And it seems like all they ever do is praise. And there's never any discipline. We've got to find that balance of where we're doing both consistently. I'm afraid that we're provoking whenever we have an avoidance or an indolence of conversation. Talk to your kids. Listen to your kids. Have conversation about things that they're interested in talking about. You say, yeah, but I don't care nothing about Fortnite. I don't care nothing about, I don't know what games they're playing now. Fortnite's probably, that was when y'all was a little growing up. It probably ain't that. I don't even know what games they play nowadays. And you say, I don't care nothing about that stuff. I didn't either. But what you're going to do is open up an avenue of conversation. Daddy's interested in what I got to talk about. Daddy will stop and listen to me. And so whenever something important comes up, you've created an avenue of conversation. So talk to your kids, teaching them that they can talk to you. I'd say secondly, have talks with your kids. Have talks with your kids about important life events. Listen, talk to them about sex. Talk to them about death. Talk to them about politics. Talk to them about the social issues of the day. If you don't, somebody else is going to. You say, man, that's uncomfortable. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, we don't want to do it. But I'd much rather have Colson's first impression about sex be what he hears from me than what he hears from his buddies at school. I'd much rather him hear, what certain sins that are prominent in this day and time whenever we're talking about homosexuality and transgenderism and things of that nature. I would rather he get his first impression from me than at school. You better have these talks with them. If not, somebody else is going to. And that first impression is going to be an impactful one. I'd say this when it comes to having those conversations, you better start earlier than you think you need to. Just do it appropriately. You start early. We had conversation with our children. You start early. You better be careful how appropriate you are, because they're going to take what you said and they're going to share it in Sunday school. And they're going to share it in the classroom at school. And you're going to get a phone call that says, so-and-so said that you told them all about this. Do it appropriately. So whenever they take what you shared with them and go and share it, it's not inappropriate to everybody else. Know their age, understand, but have those conversations. Listen, I am thankful for the open line of communication I've had with my children. There's a lot of things I have done wrong. But my wife will tell you that there's very little that even me and my daughter can't talk about. That she can be open with me and we can have discussion about. Why? Because we created an open line of conversation and we did away with barriers before they got built. And so there's not the embarrassment of talking about certain things. You say, well, I'm not talking to my daddy about that. I'm not talking about, you can do it how you want to. You have that right. But I'm just telling you, you better keep your line of communication open. Because they're going to talk to somebody. And if it's not you, you can count on it. They're talking to somebody about it. They're learning from somebody about it. They're hearing from somebody about it. Somebody asked one time, the preacher, I don't remember who it was, and this is backing up the discipline really, but it goes along with this and talking about these issues early. But they brought their kid in and they said, look, you know, he's I think he was 7 at the time. And they said, when do we, maybe he was 5. I think it was 5. And they said, when do we need to start disciplining him? When do we need to start, you know, doing this? And he said, how old is he? They said 5. He said, you're 5 years too late. You should have started early. And that's why I'm telling you, you better start early. And some of us, we grew up in a different age, in a different era, and some of those talks didn't have to take place as soon as they do now. You realize that, especially in public school systems, they're already talking about transgenderism in elementary school, 2nd and 3rd grade. We're living in a different day, a different time, and I'm just telling you, you better have had these talks before they're able to get influenced by everybody else. Man, I don't remember in the classroom growing up, hearing tell of another girl being interested in another girl, another guy being interested into another guy. I mean, until we got on up into years. It's happening in elementary school now. And they're pushing it and they're promoting it. And I'm just telling you that I want my kids' first hearing of it to be from me in a negative light, rather from their teachers and their friends in a positive light. And so I'm telling you, you better have it early conversations. You say, I don't think I need to have it this early. You're going to come home one day and find out that they've already been exposed to it. Because somebody at school, they don't care what their kids watch. And they're not checking their phones, and they're not watching what their kids are watching on TV. And it is in every show, every commercial. I mean, it is everywhere today. And so I'll promise you, they're already starting to pick up on it. I'd say lastly, there's imperative activity. There are some things that you need to do. I'm going to run through them quickly tonight. Be real. Just be real. Your kids know what's real and what's not. We tried not to have major discussions or major arguments in front of our children. This really goes back to not being one way at church and another way at the house. But I found out you didn't have to be perfect. But you do need to be real. Listen, there's certain things that your children don't need to carry the weight of yet. They don't need to hear you and mama fighting over the finances of the house if you're having to. They don't need to hear, they don't need that weight. They don't need that. If one's done something wrong, one of the spouses have done something wrong, you don't need to air it out in front of your children. I'm just telling you, you're going to end up creating a problem in provoking your children. But you better be real in front of your kids. Be honest. Don't lie to your kids. Don't lie to them. If you're going to have to lie to them, just don't tell them. Don't talk about it. You'd be better off not saying anything to them than having to lie to them. Do not lie to your children. The more lies they catch you in, the less they're going to believe you when you tell them the truth. Be involved. Try your best to be involved in their life. Know who their friends are. They're more likely to be influenced and persuaded by their friends than they are by you. You better know who they're hanging out with. Don't just assume that they're choosing to hang out with the right crowd at school. Know who they're hanging out with. Know what they're doing on their phones. Listen, we have an open policy at the house. Matter of fact, there was a rule until Jesse come along. They weren't allowed to have a phone until they were 16. Jesse got one early because they quit making iPods. And when they quit making iPods, we were going on a trip. My wife said, I don't want her to have no way, if she gets lost, something, not to have any contact with us. And so we broke our rule, gave her a phone. But here's the reality of that. They're not to have a code on their phone that Daddy doesn't know. That I can't get into it anytime. Parents, myself included, we better not be naive when it comes to those things. Your kids have got certain apps on their phone that they can talk and communicate to other people that you don't even know. You better know what's going on your kid's phone. It's just the day we're living in. Look at their conversations. Know their passcodes. And then I'd say be a pattern. Don't just tell them how to live. Show them. They're picking up on what you do more than what you say. Don't tell them that alcohol, drugs, tobacco, fornication is bad or dangerous if they're going to watch you do it. Don't tell them church is important if you're not going to be faithful. Don't tell them that the Bible is important if you're not going to read it. Don't tell them prayer is important if they're never going to see you pray. Don't tell them not to yell at their mother if you're going to do it. Don't tell them not to be disrespectful to their father if you're going to be disrespectful to him. Listen, my kids, especially my boys, they weren't allowed to be disrespectful to their mother. They didn't get to talk to their mother any way they wanted to. And they know real quick, they had a better chance of being disrespectful to me than they did of her. Here's what I told my kids, and I think it's funny that how some of us men do this, but I told my kids, look, I'm not going to let some other man talk to my wife the way you just did. Don't think just because you live in my house, you're going to get to do it. And there's some of y'all that you wouldn't dare put up with another person talking to your spouse the way you let your kids talk to them sometimes. Shame on us. Shame on us. Some of you men, if I was to walk up and talk to your wife the way your kids talk to her, you'd want to fight me, and rightfully so. But you don't say nothing to your kids. You let them say anything they want to say. I don't know if y'all have seen any of those videos. I watch some of those reels all the time, and the mama's in on it, and the son or the daughter, they're in on it, and they'll set up a video camera and say, hey, so-and-so, go take out the trash. And the one I watched the other day, he said, why don't you just shut up? I thought Daddy, I'm just going to be honest, I'd have probably done the same thing, but I thought Daddy was going to strangle him before he got a chance to tell him it was a joke. I mean, Daddy come out of the chair so quick and about had him pushed up against the wall, and he was, it's a joke. I mean, he was in tears trying to tell his daddy it was a joke. And I thought, that's how it ought to be. That's how it ought to be. I'm not letting my kids talk to my wife like that. I don't talk to her like that. Why in the world am I going to let them? I've said this before. Some of y'all are talking to your husband in such a way that if a little girl marries your son and talks to him that way, you'll be aggravated and upset. And some of you are, you're talking to your wife in such a way that whenever your daughter grows up and gets married and her husband is mean and verbally abusive, she's not going to think anything about it. Why? Because that's the way that you treated their mama all their life. I'm just telling you that you need to make sure that you are being a pattern in their life. Not just telling them, but showing them how to do certain things. I'm done tonight. How are we going to accomplish this? One, you're going to be filled with the Spirit. You're not going to be the parent you need to be without being filled with the Spirit. If you go back to Ephesians 5, and I don't have time to get into it tonight, but if you go back to Ephesians 5, before he tells us and gives instruction on the family, on how we're supposed to be as a husband, how we're supposed to be as a wife, how we're supposed to be as parents and as children, he opens that section up with, be not drunk with wine, wherein is excess, but be ye filled with the Spirit. And so we're not going to be the parent we need to be living in the flesh. Then, so you're going to be filled with the Spirit, but you're going to be fruitful in the Spirit. If you're living in the fruits of the Spirit, you're going to have an easier time not provoking your children. Galatians 5:22 through 26, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the affections and lust. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another. There's our word. He ties it in and gives us the opposite of living in the fruits of the Spirit and says that it is provoking one another. And so if we are living in the fruits of the Spirit, we're going to have an easier time not provoking our children. If your children follow the pattern of your spiritual life exactly as you've lived it behind closed doors, not at church, not in public, will they be running toward the heart of God, or will they be running away from religion as they perceive it? When the pressure's on and your child fails or frustrates you, what spills out of your heart? The fruit of the Spirit? Long-suffering? Gentleness? Temperance? Meekness? Or the provocation of a parent living in the flesh? They're going to aggravate you. You can count on it. And then they're going to turn into teenagers and aggravate you on purpose. How you handle it is going to have a lot to do with whether or not you're patterning them or you're provoking them. Don't provoke your children. Don't provoke them to anger. But God forbid that we would provoke them to wrath. That we would live and behave in such a way that they would want nothing to do with the life we've raised them in around Christianity.